So it's the normal Sunday link, the one that we always use. I think, Joel, isn't it like just if you use the normal Sunday link, you get to the live stream? Yeah. Okay. Okay, I don't want to go back. So there's a question in Realm about it? Okay, I put the link in that reply. You ready? You're on. So he'll turn you on from. Good morning. Just sort of a little word about how this morning goes. We will have the first lecture, and then by the end of the first lecture, we should find that there's coffee and donuts available for us in the parish hall afterwards, so hope that we'll get to take advantage of that. I sort of did the big intro of Peter Walhout last night, and I think I got everything but anion right. That was my whiff. So anyway, we're glad, Peter, last night was wonderful. It's great to have you here with us. Thanks for sharing your gifts with us. And before we begin, let's pray. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, you gave to your servant Peter special gifts of grace to understand and teach the truth as it is in Christ Jesus. Grant that by this teaching we may know you, the one true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Peter Walhout, welcome him with me, please.
Thanks, Chip. Thanks for showing up on your Saturday morning. I guess we have a live stream audience, too. I don't know if you were here last night or not. I won't assume you were necessarily. So I teach a physical chemistry at Wheaton College. That's the one chemistry course with a lot of math, or several courses. We sort of do the physics of chemistry. So I'm not a biologist or a synthetic chemist, but I've read a lot and I've seen a lot. So I know a wide-ranging variety of topics in science. So I also teach this course at Wheaton called Pseudoscience and Faith. It's just a class I made up. I am a little bit gullible for new wacky theories or ideas or conspiracy theories. and I tend to follow those down a rabbit hole and usually find out it's not true. But I understand the human impulse for something different, something that the experts don't know about, something that gives me unique knowledge into something that everyone's missed except this one study I'm reading. And I can tell you it usually always is not true. And that's pseudoscience. And I said last night, it's incredibly easy to do pseudoscience. It's really, really hard to do good science. Very hard to do good science. I'm going to show a video clip in a few minutes where I'm doing some science. It's the most elementary sort of general chemistry that you would do in college or even high school. But you can watch it for like 8 minutes and just get a glimpse into a lab of someone trying to do something correctly. But anyway, so this Pseudoscience and Faith course, it's a semester-long course. This is the first time I've lectured on it publicly. I've lectured on other topics. So if it's a bit rough or a bit boring, it's my first go-around with knowing what works, what doesn't work, what are important points to hit on and not. I went through this last night. I'll briefly go through it. Science could be called organized common sense. I got that from John Polkinghorne, who was a physicist at Cambridge, a colleague of Stephen Hawking, and a devout Anglican. And he eventually turned his collar around like Alistair McGrath did and became a priest. And Polkinghorne has written a lot on science and theology and philosophy. If you're interested, I'd highly recommend his books. There are denser books and there are much lighter books for the non-science public. So that's John Polkinghorne, and I got this phrase reading one of his books. He didn't originate it, but organized common sense is a good way to view science. And this is just my own definition, which I don't put a ton of time in, but I thought I'd give you something off, from a working scientist. What is it? A search for truth about the material universe, including discovery, cataloging, understanding the processes and laws that govern it through rational testing and evidence. And this was the checklist that I got from this Understanding Science website at UC Berkeley, which is for 100 years has been a great center of science. Focus on the natural world. And I said last night that the social sciences, instead of the natural world, you would put human enterprises in there. Economics is a social science, using mathematical tools, rational exploration to understand the flow of money and interest rates and all that. That's obviously not the natural world, but it's a subject that you can apply scientific investigation towards. Testable ideas relies on evidence, involves the scientific community, this is where pseudoscientists often fall short. They're not involving the scientific community. They're sort of contra the scientific community. They're often outside the scientific community, which other people say, oh, it's just a club, and if you're not in the club, you can't, they don't believe you. Leads to ongoing research, benefits from scientific behavior. The charge about being outside the scientific, if you're outside the scientific community, you're shut out because they don't like your views. That's not exactly, that's like saying you're shut out of arguing to an appellate judge because you're not a lawyer. There's certain things certain credentials, certain things you have to accomplish before you're accepted as a professional. I can't go teach science at the local middle school because I'm not certified. I don't know how to teach middle schoolers. So there are certain things, there's a reason you need to be part of the scientific community because that's where science is done and peer reviewed. Okay. So I did not do this last night. This is also from that site that I thought was good. Behaving scientifically. So that was the last point here, benefits from scientific behavior. So I'm trying to give a flavor for how scientists think and act and are expected to act. Pay attention to what other people have already done. Scientific knowledge is built cumulatively. You need to know what people have already discovered before you. This means that scientists study their fields extensively to understand the current state of knowledge. So I'm writing a paper right now, and it got peer-reviewed, and I need to submit revisions, and they said, what about these references? You seem to be citing these older references, but you haven't cited these 3 articles from the last 3 years. I said, okay, I need to work on that. So I looked them up, saw if it was relevant or not. Sometimes that's just a reviewer that wants their work cited in your paper. You have to know what's been done. Expose your ideas to testing, strive to describe and perform the tests that might suggest you are wrong, and or allow others to do so. This may seem like shooting yourself in the foot, but it is critical to the progress of science. Science aims to accurately understand the world, and if ideas are protected from testing, it's impossible to figure out if they're accurate or inaccurate. I'll be saying more about this in the examples I give this morning. Assimilate the evidence. Evidence is the ultimate arbiter of scientific ideas. Scientists are not free to ignore evidence. Scientific ideas are sustained by evidence and cannot be propped up if the evidence tears them down. That's part of just knowing what's come before you, what's been published before, what strong pieces of evidence are out there. Strong meaning more than one person has probably seen them and reported on it. Openly communicate ideas and tests to others. So communication is important for many reasons. The scientist keeps knowledge to themselves. Others cannot build upon those ideas, double-check their work, or devise new ways to test the ideas. So that's just about the openness of science, publishing your results. If you have a patent, this doesn't apply as much because patents restrict you really legally from disclosing things. But otherwise, free and open communication is a hallmark of healthy science. And play fair, act with scientific integrity. This is more personal traits, hiding evidence, selectively reporting evidence, faking data directly towards science's main goal, to construct accurate knowledge about the natural world. So this is, pseudoscience falls prey to this, not necessarily hiding evidence, but sort of ignoring evidence, selectively reporting evidence. Faking data, that's more serious, that's not very widespread. But all scientists are individuals, are fallen, and so there's sin and lying and deception in every facet of life, including science. But that's dealt with, it's rooted out. Okay, so pseudoscience then, study and presentation of a topic that heavily relies on scientific-like methods and evidence, but is missing some key element of the scientific process. And here, I skipped through this last night, so I want to go through this in a little more detail. So you might be watching a YouTube video or an infomercial. I'm thinking of when I was in grad school, I got hooked by this Kevin Trudeau huckster on infomercials, and he was selling something called Mega Memory. And I actually bought it. That's how gullible I am. Because I wanted to really improve my memory. And it was pseudoscience. So an effective presentation that draws you in. And this is small print, so I'll read it again. Appeal to scientific authority, especially prominent scientists, National Academy members, Nobel laureates. The movie and book I mentioned last night, Merchants of Doubt, is a lot about the tobacco industry in the 60s and the scientists that they employed to give the impression that there was nothing unhealthy about smoking. It did not cause cancer. And then that went on to secondhand smoke. And they employed some National Academy members. National Academy of Sciences, it's like the Hall of Fame of science. It's really hard to get in. Most major universities have 1 to 5 current faculty members that are in the National Academy of Sciences. It's not like everyone at Caltech or everyone at Harvard's in the National Academy. They have a higher share of their, but yeah, so if you can get a National Academy member to say something, the rest of the scientific community takes note. So the tobacco industry's got two National Academy members in physics to back what they were doing. And they were doing it based on their view of communism and limited government and their hatred of regulation. They were dealing in an area totally outside their expertise. They're physicists, not physicians or biologists or really knowing anything about the effects of smoke on the human body. But it didn't matter. They had that aura of being in the National Academy. And physicists, to be honest, think they can do anything, I think. I can say that because my brother is a physicist, and he would agree with me that that's how they are. Presenter feels safe and likable. That's important. Like if you like the presenter, you want to believe what they're saying. A scientific sounding presentation, including some accepted scientific facts, perhaps along with visual proof, like a little experiment. Or if they're saying something that they are implying you should be able to understand, this is fairly basic science, and you find yourself not understanding it, then you think, oh, they must be right. I'm not getting it, but it seems like this is pretty basic, so I'll believe what they're saying. And I apologize if I say he, but I found that men, well, I'm treading on dangerous ground, but I found that it's typically people's uncles that are swayed by pseudoscience more than their aunts. I don't know if it's cultural or what, but it seems like it seems to be generally male-dominated, this conspiracy theories and falling prey to, or presenting pseudoscience. But anyway, presenter seems smart, that's important. Personal testimony, again, something that connects you with the speaker, something from the story of their life. Maybe they themselves were skeptical at first. And you know, I did this when I said I'm gullible. I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes in pseudoscience. I bought that mega memory. Sort of a personal testimony is effective at selling something. Coming to believe in this thing has changed their life, either physically, mentally, or spiritually. And you know, there are endless YouTube videos dealing with all manner of pseudoscience, where you can find all these keys. And a lot of it is sort of sales. You're selling an idea, so a good pseudoscientist is a good salesperson. And then you can add in a spiritual, miraculous anecdote. And after the break, on the second talk, I'll be talking about the Shroud of Turin, which is one of my favorite topics and how this whole thing kind of got started for me. And there's some really, really kind of wacky things that came about that led to some actual science on the Shroud. But remember, just because a presentation has all these elements doesn't mean it's true. So I want to talk about alkaline water. I thought I'd just first talk about hydrogen water. This is just a sample of some claims. Hydrogen is the smallest atom on the periodic table. This makes it perfect for accessing the deepest, darkest parts of our body, mitochondria cells, where other elements can hardly reach. Every chromosome, amino acid, and protein block in our bodies need hydrogen to build good, healthy cells. So this reads a little pseudoscience-y, but this is water that is supposedly infused with H2, which is the natural form of hydrogen. Hydrogen is an antioxidant. So there are a lot of people that are selling hydrogen-infused water, claiming that it has health benefits. It is not at all proven scientifically. Here's a typical. This guy is actually pretty good at his pseudoscience. He has a little demo where he shows the antioxidant properties of H2. And he's selling something. So, you know, a sign that something might be pseudoscientific is you ask who's funding them, why are they doing this, is this part of their job, and are they selling you something? Are they trying to sell you something? If so, it's a good chance it's not all that scientific. So he's selling a filter that supposedly will create H2 in your water. As the water is transformed into the hydrogen-rich antioxidant fountain of youth. He even claims that people look older because they just drink regular water. That hydrogen water will actually make you feel and look younger, which is an age-old selling technique. So I would say, this sort of pseudoscience, it does focus on the natural world. It kind of aims to explain the natural world, uses testable ideas, does rely on evidence, but it doesn't do any of the last three. It doesn't involve the scientific community, doesn't really lead to ongoing research, doesn't really benefit from science. It's more just a ploy to get you to buy that water. So I'm going to talk now about this high pH water, which you've probably seen. It's everywhere now. Phenomenal. pH is a measure of how much acidity, how acidic or basic your water is. This was on the Walmart site, $125. pH 11. So neutral water is pH 7. Basic goes up. Acidic goes down. They make the claim here, phenomenal, 1 oxygen molecule and 2 hydrogen molecules. It's once bonded or kidnapped, it is now back to water, which you eliminate through urination. Phenomenal is not comparable. So I think it's been translated from a different language. Works in an entirely different manner than other alkaline solutions in drinking waters. Try our oxygenated water and feel great. Here's another one. There's Shack holding the high pH water. So they have some money behind them, this company, to get Shack to hawk their water. I had not heard of this one. Deliciously smooth. And I've done some taste tests with my students, and they can tell the difference between tap water and high pH water, but it could just as well be the other minerals they might add to the alkaline water. Here's alkaline water, high pH water from Austria, the Muir family. They look cool and young, and it's all because of the pH water. This is the Holstein artesian water. How it works, 8.3, high natural alkalinity. This actually isn't all that basic, but high pH is hugely important in drinking water because its alkalinity helps return the body's pH back to neutral. Is that true? No. Balancing many of the acidic elements we encounter every day. An ideal drinking water to maintain good health has an alkaline pH level between 8 and 9.5. Holstein's water's pH level is 8.3. So it's this claim that's made over and over, returning your body's pH to neutral. Your body has an extraordinarily finely tuned system already in place that keeps a lot of your body at pH 7.2, 7.4. And if that deviates from 7.4 by plus or minus 0.2, you're in bad shape. You're probably going to die. I don't want to neutralize my bloodstream to pH 7. That means I'm going to die. We have a physician up here in the second row who I was talking with beforehand, and he can confirm that. He said he works almost every day trying to keep people from having their pH get too low. So its alkalinity helps return the body's pH back to neutral. That is just false, completely, utterly false. Here are some machines that you can buy to make your own alkaline water. And you also can get the only water ionizer consumer's guide you'll ever need. And you can download it. You get a big PDF. These are, between $4,000 and $10,000, depending on the size of your family. You know, it's not bad for a piece of scientific equipment, those prices. $13,000, I don't know. So I'm going to show a video. Oh no, here's the last. So here's what they say. Detoxification, pH water, it is that modern life is toxic to your health. So detox, weight loss, alkaline water will help you lose weight, helps you reduce cholesterol. So they cite a couple studies here, and I'll take a look at some of those studies, kind of go down the rabbit hole a little bit to see, is there really evidence for this high pH water? But I have a video that's going to get fired up here in a second, where I did this just for these talks, but I'll use it going forward, where I just show to a chemist how ridiculous it sounds that drinking pH 9 water can in any way neutralize your body. Because it goes in your mouth and right to your stomach, and your stomach is acidic. So I just kind of prove that this high pH water, if you drink it, it doesn't do any good whatsoever, because it's instantly neutralized in your stomach, which is acidic. All right, so yeah, we can play it. So the audio is not here, which is maybe good. You don't hear my voice, and I wasn't fumbling around too much in lab. But I have a pH meter here. That's the probe, so I'll talk over what I'm doing. These are buffer solutions. pH 4, which is acidic, pH 7, which is neutral, and then the pH 10 is the blue. So I'm calibrating my pH meter. pH meter is in every lab in the world, pretty much. It was invented in the 30s by a guy named Beckman. And not surprisingly, there are Beckman Institutes of Science all over the world. He made quite a lot of money with his pH meter. I'm showing that it's calibrated. I had already calibrated it, and I'm just showing that you put it in the buffer, you get 10, 7, 4. So we have a pretty well calibrated electrode. So this will take a few minutes, and I pondered whether this was a good use of time, but I thought, let's just watch a little bit of science in progress. You can, develop ideas of, maybe the background, what's going on. Okay, here's my high pH water, which I had just purchased at Mariano's. I got a stir bar. Students are always fascinated with the stir bar. It's a magnetic stir bar that just stirs things. That's pretty universal. This is a hot plate. I'm not using the hot plate. The knob's behind my phone. And then the speed of the stir bar. You don't get to hear the clanking of the stir bar. It's kind of a reassuring, comforting sound to a scientist. It's kind of like white noise in a lab, the stir bar going. So here's the high pH water that I poured, and I'm getting, in fact, a high pH. So they're not lying. It is high pH water. That's fine. And I mentioned that the electrode sometimes takes a while to get up to the high pH. And I learned something doing this. If you don't have a very concentrated solution, there's not a lot of ions in it, it takes the pH electrode a long time to respond. Usually when you use a pH electrode, there's quite a lot of ions floating around, salts floating around, and the response isn't so slow. So I did learn something. After doing this, I was a little puzzled by why the pH meter was taking so long to respond. So you'd call this an ion deficient solution, and it just takes some time. But so we're definitely approaching the higher pH. And this is where I had asked if we could do the video at like 1.5 speed, but the software is not allowing it. So here, Oh, yeah, so I put Phenolphthalein Indicator in. I forgot what I was doing here. So that is a chemical indicator of pH. It's a great, again, phenolphthalein will be in most labs around the world. It's clear below pH 7 for acids. It's pink above pH 7 for bases. So I put that indicator in, it instantly turned pink. So here I'm going to show, as a source of acid, I have just some soda water. I opened it right there, a Diet Coke. I say soda is around pH 3, pretty acidic. Your stomach pH is, I've looked at this a little bit, it's anywhere between pH 1 and 3, depending on when the last sort of injection of HCl was into your stomach. So 1 is highly acidic, 3 is still the acidity of soda pop. So your stomach is at least usually as acidic as soda pop. So I'm using the soda pop here as a proxy or substitute for your stomach. So you drink the high pH water, it falls down your esophagus to the stomach, which is at pH 3. And then I say the pH water is 2 units above 7. This is a logarithmic scale, the pH scale. So a pH of 8 is 10 times more basic than a pH of 7, which is neutral. pH of 9 is 100 times more. So we have pH 9 water, which is 100 times more basic than neutral water. And then we have soda pop, which is 10 to the 4, 10,000 times more acidic than neutral water. So we have a disparity here. The acid, the soda water, is 100 times more basic than the basic water. Or I'm sorry, 100 times more acidic than the basic water. So I argue that I have 100 milliliters of the alkaline water. I argue I probably just need 1 milliliter of the soda pop to neutralize that high pH water. And that's about 20 drops, very roughly speaking. 20 drops from an eyedropper is about 1 milliliter. I'll have 100 milliliters of this is just a rinse solution here of roughly neutral. So I have 100 milliliters of my high pH water. And because we're going pH 3 versus pH 9, that 100-fold disparity between 4 units below 7 and only 2 units above 7, that factor of 100 difference means I only need a few drops of my stomach acid to totally neutralize the high pH water. So here I put the electrode back into the high pH water, and the electrode, this is where the electrode's taking a while to respond. And this had me a little puzzled. I knew it would eventually drift up, but I didn't, for this video, I didn't want to, wait forever. It already might seem really, really long to you. But what I do is I sort of jump, I'm going to put it in a higher buffer just to sort of get it up to a high pH a different way, and then put it back in the high pH water. All right, this is where I wish I could speed it up a bit. This is a light scattering instrument back here, by the way. It has nothing to do with what I'm doing here, but this was donated by the family of a couple former chem majors at Wheaton. Scientific funding science costs money. Someone asked me a question last night about funding, and funding agencies often are driven sometimes by policy, and not always by science. And so navigating, getting funding can be a problem. You can have policy driving where the money goes, and that's sort of human nature, but that's not exactly science's fault. That's the people with the money and the powers have the ability to direct where money goes. Okay, so here I'm putting it back. I finally say I'm not waiting any longer. I'm going to put it back in. So with a high salt buffer, the pH meter immediately responds. and then I rinse it off again, put it back in. So these pH meters are pretty amazing. They work, there's a very thin layer of glass, and it relies on measuring a current across, there's an inside solution in the pH meter, and then the solution outside. And there's a very fine response of ions through the glass. And that gets modified quite a bit by how much H+. H+ is the acid, or the lack of H+ makes it a basic solution. And so there's an actual chemical process, physical process, that is the reason it takes a long time in a salt-deficient solution. Now I'm putting the soda in. So this is the grand climax of the experiment. It's a real cliffhanger. And I am doing it live. I opened the Coke. I didn't know how it would go. I mean, I've done it before, so I kind of knew how it would go, but so I'm dripping it in. I was counting the drops. And notice the color. So the instrument, again, is taking a while to respond because of this low salt content overall. But the color doesn't lie. The color instantly changed. So it is already neutralized. Just a few drops of soda water totally annihilated all the claims of the high pH water companies that you drink this and it will balance your pH. No, it's traveled 1.5 feet and it's already been completely neutralized. That's why it's completely clear, because it is under. It's a little bit acidic now. So it just took about 10 drops actually of that soda water, which I was using to mimic the acid in your stomach. So I'm just, yeah, putting the meter back in the pH 7. If I did this again, I think if I threw a little bit of just table salt into the high pH water, that might really improve the response of the pH meter. So now the pH meter is showing that it's neutral, and it'll come down even under 7. All right, so that's it for the video. If we can go back to the PowerPoint. So I wanted to do this just to demonstrate how ridiculous this idea of high pH water balancing your whole body would be to any chemist. And I involved the community of my chemistry department. I said, am I crazy here? Is it as simple as it'll get neutralized as soon as it hits your stomach? And they say, yeah, of course. That's what happens. And that's what the nephrologist here agrees with as well. So, there are other ways to try to affect the pH in regions of your body, but it's not through the stomach. It would be through injection or other means. All right. Let's see, I got 15 minutes. I'm just going to look a little more at this and show, a more scientific approach to this. There is something between your mouth and your stomach, and I like to say the last biology class I took, I was 14 years old in high school. So I am not at all a biologist, but I can read, anyone can read a lot of the abstracts and conclusions from medical research. And so that's one thing I would encourage you to, I'll show a little bit more about how you might go about that. But anyone really who can read English and understand can follow the claims of a lot of medical research. Not so much natural science. Their audience, they know, is not really the general public, but a lot of medical journals have realized there's a lot of different people reading these, and they have really good synopses right up front and conclusions. So I Googled alkaline benefits, and I hit on some, it's just all over the place, the high pH water. And here are a few links. Increases energy levels in a Newsmax health review about how energy levels are increased with high pH water. Restores pH balance to the body, that's the number one thing. And again, that is the easiest thing to disprove. Because again, as soon as it hits your stomach, it's just regular water. It doesn't do anything for the pH of your body. Extra hydrating than other water. So I clicked on this link. Oop. No. And I came to here, and there was a wall, and it was in Chinese. And so that wasn't all that helpful. Who knows what that article says? I have my doubts. But then there was another one that was linked. And this is from Annals of Otology, Rhinology, and Laryngology. Laryngology dealing with the larynx, which is between your mouth and stomach. And this was a study, and so here's an example of something everyone here can read. You can go to Google Scholar and search for what you're looking for. Google Scholar will refer to all the scientific journals. And a lot of them are freely available, a lot of them are not. But if you go to a university library or maybe even a public library, you might have access to some of those other journals. Here's what the objectives, the methods. At the cellular level, tissue-bound pepsin is fundamental. Pepsin's a protein fundamental to the pathophysiologic mechanism of reflux disease. So acid reflux from the stomach up the esophagus. And there's boy, that's a tough word. Laryngopharyngeal reflux and for esophageal damage, and gastroesophageal reflux disease differ. So there's two types of reflux. It's actually due to the pepsin, which requires acid for its activation. So this pepsin is what does the damage, but it needs an acidic environment to be activated. So one study showed that the pepsin is inactivated if you can neutralize its surroundings. So that's what this study showed, that the pepsin can be neutralized. And then there was another study, so that was a totally legitimate study. It's totally science, peer-reviewed. But then the alkaline water people picked up on it. But these aren't, another thing to do is to look at who's writing the article. I talked about this last night a little bit. Are they scientists? Do they have PhDs or long years of lab experience if they're not a PhD? What institution are they working for? Is it a respected institution that's been around? All these people totally fill the bill for that. I looked them all up. This is in Journal of the American Medical Association. They're going to have good journals. They're upstanding. It's in some ways the gold standard of medical research. So here's an article where they actually had patients drink alkaline water and a Mediterranean diet versus a drug they could take for this reflux problem. And so the objective to determine whether treatment with a diet-based approach with standard reflux precautions alone can improve symptoms of LPR, the horrendously difficult word to pronounce, reflux. In this retrospective study, we report the efficacy of a wholly dietary approach using alkaline water, a plant-based Mediterranean-style diet. So the notion is that with this earlier study that showed alkaline water can deactivate pepsin, then naturally so they say let's feed them, let's have them drink alkaline water because it'll bathe your larynx in basic water. So before it's neutralized by the stomach, that high pH water can actually maybe do some good. to determine whether, whether the diet and alkaline water, and then design. This was a retrospective medical chart review of 2 treatment cohorts from 2010 to 2012. 85 patients were, that means the data has already been collected and they're going back and pulling some more results out of this earlier study. So a lot of patients, 85, 99, they were drinking Mediterranean-style diet. Conclusions, jump to the conclusions. Laryngopharyngeal reflux has become a common diagnosis in the otolaryngologist's office. Treatment includes this drug, which deals with the proton pump therapy, which comes at a high price, both with cost and potential adverse side effects. Our data suggests that the effect of scores among patients, so the patients reflected on how well they were doing with their acid reflux. So it wasn't like a invasive, a scientific look at how it's doing. It was a patient survey, where, detailed survey, how were they doing after these treatments. So the drugs that they were taking was not significantly better than that of alkaline water and a plant-based Mediterranean-style diet. In fact, our data suggests that the plant-based approach is at least as good, if not better, than the drug therapy. Thus, we recommend that a patient with suspected LPR, this reflux, at least attempt a dietary approach prior to any pharmacological intervention. That seems like a sound conclusion. What they also will say is they can't distinguish between the alkaline water and the Mediterranean-style diet. Maybe the alkaline water wasn't doing anything. Maybe it was all the Mediterranean-style diet. They just say, we don't know. They were doing both at once. The purpose of this earlier study wasn't just on the alkaline water. So that is, to cite this, for an alkaline water company to cite this without that specificity, it could have also been a Mediterranean diet. That's sort of hiding the evidence a little bit. They're not really showing the full impact or conclusion of the article. Then I also wanted to show what certain journals will require of their authors is a section on limitations. Now, my area, natural science, doesn't do this. Specifically, it's always encouraged in your conclusions to say, or your results, what can you say and what can't you say? So I was just struck by, how last night there was a quote saying that this seems like scientists shooting themselves in the foot. Well, they're not. Scientists aren't out to sell something. They're not out to withhold evidence because you'll be more likely to buy something. They're for full transparency. They just want the truth. So showing the limitations helps others reading the article know what they could maybe contribute, what they could do, further research paths to take. It's meant to limit how people take your results so they don't take them too far. So here, there are a number of limitations for this study, including the inherent biases of retrospective chart reviews, such as selection, information, and exclusion group biases. As rigorous as exclusion criteria were, patients with dual diagnoses may have been enrolled in this study with dual diagnoses. So they're saying this was a retrospective study. It's not a perfect study to answer this question that we're seeking to answer. Confirmation of the diagnosis with objective measures, such as pH testing, was inconsistent. The placebo effect should also be recognized. And I would say for a lot of testimony, personal testimony about a product, this would go for like acupuncture or chiropractic, which are technically pseudoscience, not because they don't work or because they're bad scientists or there's bad faith efforts anywhere. No, there's just not clear scientific evidence that who can benefit from acupuncture or chiropractic, that you actually will benefit. There have been a ton of studies, for sure, on both chiropractic and acupuncture, but nothing definitive has emerged. It is not settled science, whether these are effective. We can't say you have this, therefore this will work. No doubt it works for a lot of people. no doubt it doesn't work for a lot of people. And a lot of it might be the placebo effect, which is not something to sneeze at. Placebo effect makes you feel better. That's a good thing. So you can take sugar pills and you feel better, and you claim the sugar is doing marvelous things. Sugar is acting in a way that doctors just don't understand. Well, that's not true. They understand the placebo effect, and that's a real good thing. In addition, the study design did not differentiate between the effects of alkaline water and diet. So there it is. Determining adherence to dietary guidelines was not strictly standardized, so they weren't, they didn't know how well the patients were actually doing with their diets and how much water maybe they were drinking. Anyway, randomized clinical trials are necessary to corroborate the results of this study. So there again, this is published. It doesn't mean it's a fact. It doesn't mean it's settled science. And it takes the research community to come around an idea and say, this always seems to be working. We seem to understand this as a community. Let's move on and do some other research. That's when you know it's a settled question, when scientists are no longer really researching it anymore. Or they're going in much different directions. Future prospective studies will focus on correlating subjective findings with objective measures such as levels of pepsin and the oropharynx prior to and following treatment with either diet or the drug. Clinicians should also be educated. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then the last thing I want to look at, it's 10 o'clock, right? So I'll just take, yeah. So this was the last study. So I basically showed you the scientific, what science says about high pH water. I showed you my own take, which says it's ridiculous that it can neutralize your whole body's pH if it's instantly neutralized in your stomach. We've showed there is potential benefit if you have laryngeal reflux. That's the one thing. And then there was this exercise study. This was the other, there was the one study behind the Chinese paywall that I didn't know what that was saying. There was the one on the pepsin in lab, and then there was the study with the Mediterranean diet and the actual patients and their reflux. This is the last one. This is on health, on recovery from a workout. So I looked up all these authors. This is not a great, well, I shouldn't say. I didn't look at the level of the journal. So I might say more about this later this morning, but there are various ways of ranking journals and their credibility it's loosely based on how often do scientists use this journal or cite this journal in their own work. So there's usually 4 levels of journal. Quarter 1 is the gold standard. Quarter 2 is fine. It's just not, they're a little more specialized. The third quartile gets a little iffy. The fourth quartile is very sketchy. It's almost like if it's grammatically correct and it seems scientific, we'll publish it. I'm not saying it's all pseudoscience, but why would you put it in a quarter 4 journal if it's good enough work to be at least in quarter 3 or quarter 2? I didn't look this one up. It's got a good sounding title. It sounds like it's probably a legitimate journal. And I looked at all the authors. It's a strange collection of authors, but the lead author is at Thomas, at an institution, I think it might be Thomas Jefferson School of Medicine, I'm not positive, in Philly. The others are kind of around the country. There's a statistician. So basically they had 100 participants, men and women, all healthy. They did a workout, and then half of them drank regular water, bottled water, not high pH, and the other half drank high pH water. And they looked at the recovery as they're, right after the workout they drank it, and then they monitored them for 2 hours. They monitored all sorts of indicators, including blood viscosity, which is related to blood pressure. And nothing showed any difference between the regular water and the high pH water, except for a little bit of difference in one of the measures of blood viscosity. And this, they didn't even show, they agreed that the error bars are overlapping here. These bars show the error on the data point. And there does seem to be a difference. They say that the blue is the alkaline water, the red was the regular water. There seems to be a recovery to baseline a little quicker with the high pH water. So that your blood viscosity, they're claiming, gets back to normal quicker with the high pH water. There's not a big difference here, and they even admit the error bars are overlapping, and this is not actually all that significant. I have some issues with the paper. I went to the data table that showed the data, and these were the numbers they quoted for the regular water and high pH water, plus or minus 20.7. This error bar is plus or minus 5. You know, it's at 113, 114. Plus or minus 20, this is plus or minus 5. I don't know what's going on there. It might be that this was the standard deviation, and what they showed here was the actual, well, you have to know stats. It might be the actual average of the mean, where you divide by the square root of the total number of the sample size, divide by square root of 50, and then split it in half again, and then you can get that. So I was being very generous with, maybe they just messed it up, but it's a pretty big mess up. I don't understand what's going on here. That gives me some pause about this whole article, actually. And then they also, but it could be an honest mistake that the peer review didn't pick up, but it's hard to believe that that would be the case. Then I'll end with just saying that they agree this is not a big difference. 113 versus 110, is it really, and they speculated on how the high pH water might have achieved this, but it was very long-winded, and they never really got to how does it actually get from the esophagus to, you know, lowering the viscosity of the blood all over your body. But then they also said this is not significant, but individual, this is just the average of all 50 participants. What they did say was that participant by participant, the people that drank the high pH water were lower significantly. So they claim that while this doesn't show a big difference, when you break it down to individual by individual, there was a much more dramatic effect of drinking the high pH water and the recovery. They didn't give any of that data. That would seem to be the critical data to actually show. And they just said it in words. So that gives me pause too about this study. They show all this data, they gave it the whole table of this data and then said, this isn't all that significant. What was significant was, and then they 2 sentences, and that's what gets quoted everywhere. But they didn't actually show that data. So what also gives me pause, they were drinking Essentia water, that's high pH water. Well, that's fine, they have to buy some brand of high pH water. Essentia is a brand that I've used in these demos that I've done. But then I say funding. So this journals have to say who the funding is. National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health. Well, research study was supported by a grant from Essentia Water. Huh, interesting. Doesn't mean it's bad science, necessarily. It just, again, gives you some pause. Alkaline bottled water for the study was provided. Essentia Water was not involved in any on-site data collection or the analysis and interpretation of it, and I believe that. Competing interests you also have to report now. Like I have a company that does this, or maybe that author reports having received consulting fees and stock options from Essentia Water. So not only did Essentia fund it, but one of the authors is getting paid. So that's why they show the competing interests. So it seemed like a good study. It was well done. It was isolated. It was done at a research facility in New Jersey. you know, it seemed like a pretty good study. I'm just a little skeptical of any conclusions you can draw from it. So more, you know, more work could be done and should be done. But the point is that the high pH water companies are just citing this as, look, science says it helps. Buy our product. And that is pseudoscience. Using, you know, it looks like science, it feels like science, but it's actually not settled science. It's not part of coming out of the scientific community. It's one study. So I'll end with that. This was sort of the more technical in depth. I just wanted to give an example of diving deep a little bit into an issue. Anyone can go to Google Scholar. You could understand that JAMA article. You know, it's regular English words that they use. You can look up a term you don't understand. It takes some work. Science is hard work. That's why a lot of people hate it, at least in school. Everyone loves the results of it, the demos, the gee whiz, cool aspects of it. But actually doing it is hard work. And scientists that do it devote their life to it. And they have a great passion for doing it correctly. All right, so I'll end there for now. Take questions? Or donuts?
Yeah, questions or donuts? And by the way, we have a couple scientific studies that suggest that these particular donuts are really, really good. So I'm not going to cite all the sources, but...
Maybe just, if there's a burning quick question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When are you going to launch your pseudoscience app? We can go to it, you can do all this hard work, so we can send all the items we're being tricked by. Who has time to keep up with all this science?
Yeah, I'll show a few resources in the next talk. But that's a good idea, an army of people to answer questions. I don't think that's out there.
You talk about, kind of one of the questions is, are they trying to sell you something as far as that? And I think you're talking a lot about science kind of within academia, but a lot of science is also done within the corporate world.
Yeah.
And they are definitely trying to sell us something. So how does that change? You know, I mean, those are scientists doing, I would guess, science, trying to, build technology, developing new polymers, whatnot at these companies, but they are definitely with the end goal of selling us products.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of scientists are employed in industry, as we call it, as opposed to academia or government labs. Those are the three main places scientists work: government labs. Government funds stuff that won't make anyone money and is not all that interesting sometimes. But someone's got to do it. And so the government steps in and does that hard, good work. I think most scientists, though, working in industry are developing a product, and it's usually a little more obvious that the product works, I would say. There's less selling of the science in that case. Like here's a new polymer coating that, yeah, there is some selling of the science, but it's often the body. So I would separate natural things like materials, a new golf club, an apple that tastes really good, from health concerns. Because the human body and human health is extraordinarily complex and extraordinarily hard to test for a lot of reasons. So that's where a lot of the selling and pseudoscience takes place, because it's not easy to do the science, and the science isn't out there, and you can't hire someone to do the science. Like, you can hire someone to test this golf club and show it really works better. But science related to food and to health and to diet, it's just extraordinarily complicated to say what if there's not settled science in a lot of it. And I think that's where a lot of the pseudoscience arguments come in. Yeah, that's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms.
Excuse me, a lot. Everything you talked about was changing the pH and that, but it didn't talk about anything in any of that about the chemical composition of it to make it change the pH. I mean, seemed like that would be part of what consideration in studies.
Yeah, there's a variety of ways they make it, but they also cite the minerals that are involved in making it alkaline, making it basic. And so some of them cite that, yeah, that's a good point. There are some of the more nuanced or savvy high pH companies will, I think, know they won't make the claim about neutralizing the pH of your body. Their claim will be the minerals that are involved in making it high pH. Those can, those aren't neutralized or anything. Those, you can't destroy matter. So those will find their way to your body. If you drink a ton of magnesium, that's going to have a real effect on your body. Yeah, so there are some claims about what those minerals can do. I think you can just take a supplement, or it's still being billed as the water, but if it's really the mineral, there's better ways probably to get more of it than through this iron deficient water.
All right, let's take about a 20-minute break. Enjoy some refreshment, and we'll be back here at about 10:30.
Yes. Shroud of Turin, burial cloth of Christ is coming up next. So.